Welcome to Rico 12. I'm Justin, your host and a beautifully imperfect, stumbling, bumbling child of an absolutely powerful and perfectly loving God and an addict living in the miracle of recovery. Rico 12 is all about exploring the common threads of addiction and sharing tools and hope from those on a similar path. We gather from diverse backgrounds, faiths, and places and fellowships to learn and support one another. Our speakers are members, like I said, of various fellowships, addictions, and afflictions, thus showing the common threads of recovery no matter our addiction or affliction. Today's meeting is number 300 of the Rico 12 speaker meeting, and that includes the Afro-Euro meetings that we do nearly every week. And I'm blown away by what this little project that I felt God called me to in 2020 has grown into. 4 Rico 12 podcasts, over 200,000 downloads in 152 countries, and 7,239 cities worldwide. And 26% of those downloads are happening outside of the North America. You know, I'm sitting here, I'm patting myself on the back. This is all God. This is not me. And this is you in the fellowship, the fellowships that have helped make this happen. Thank you all. It's crazy. God does for us what we cannot do for ourselves. Today's speaker for the 300th meeting is Debi S, a Rico 12 repeat speaker. She spoke previously to us on meeting number 254 with a talk entitled Ninth Step Healing. And Debi's topic today is 10th Step Evolution. So we're walking down this path with Debi, and I'm excited to hear her message here in a few minutes. But first, for just a little bit more business. Rico 12 has several recovery resources in our family of podcasts and social media communities. To learn more, listen more, connect more, or just hang out and learn and grow with us, you can check out those other podcasts you'll find at rico12.com. Join our social communities and check out the chat in the show notes. I'll put some things in the show notes here, and so that you can go to those as you and in the chat here, so you can go to those as you would like. Rico 12 is self-supporting, and your contributions help us continue our mission. Thanks to all of our spearheads, past, present, and future, and a special thanks this week to Angela for your contributions over the last year as a monthly contributor. Her donations have really helped in this project, as well as all other donations. If you out there also feel the desire to become a spearhead and support this cause, visit rico12.com/support. Click on the links that I'll put in the chat here for one-time or monthly donation options. Your support, not just financially, but with your word of mouth, makes a huge difference in keeping us being able to share these messages of recovery. We look forward each meeting to receiving from the light reflected from our speakers. That light inspires hope, meaning, worth, and growth in us, the listening audience. Now I'm going to introduce our guest speaker for today, Debi S, and give just a little background on her. Debi's first meeting was in 1981. Her first sober date was in 1987. Her current and permanent sober date is January 31st of 1994. After a long history of trouble at home, school, and the law from a very young age, including rehab, detox, jail, DUI, psych ward, diagnoses, medication, etc., Debi finally surrendered. She was dry 3.5 years for the second time and ready to suicide. She reached out for help for more humility and desperation than she had ever been able to muster, and allowed a recovered member to take her through the big book and the steps. Debi finally had the vital spiritual experience the book talks about, did all of her ninth step amends, and in a meaningful way now lives in steps 10 through 12. Take it away, Debi. The floor is yours.
Debi, alcoholic. Really, really good to be here. Thank you so much for having me. It's really wonderful to get to share on 10. I've kind of become like a 9, 10, and 12 girl. Those are my 3 favorite steps, and I really, really, really love to share on all of them. God, there was something I was going to say that just escaped me completely already. It's funny. I was sharing with Justin before the meeting started, before some of you joined us, that like was shared, my sobriety date is January 31st of 1994. So next month, I was going to say next year. I guess it is next year, but next month I'll be 31 years sober, and the last year or two. So that's well into double digits. The last year or two, I have had just a monumental change around my relationship with step 10. And it has been so wonderful. It is, I've changed the way it's become so much more meaningful and effective. And, I've changed the way, not I've changed. It's been changed, the way that I understand it, the way that I understand the directions. I mean, just everything has changed. And that's so incredible to me how that can happen so far down the road, and it's so good that that continues to happen so far down the road. Um, I often joke about some of the things that I've gotten to be so terribly wrong about, and how grateful I am that I got to be so wrong, and some of the things that, honest to God, some of the things that I share with you today that are recorded today, that I say with such passion and conviction, I could be saying something different 6 months from now. And that's not a bad sign. That's a good sign, and I'm really grateful to understand that today. Um, I think because I really do want to share so much about, I usually would share just the briefest little, kind of basic history and qualify a bit, but I think I'm just going to go straight to 10. Oh, and I did not set my timer, which I want to do. I think I'm going to go straight to 10 and just start with on page 59, how it actually reads within how it works, where we have the steps listed. And step 10 reads, continued to take personal inventory. I still want to take your inventory, by the way. I really do. I mean, I really do. And that happens sometimes for me in my 10 steps. I realize that, oh gosh, I'm really just inventorying them. But continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. And then if you flip over, not that anyone's expected to do this, but if you flip over to 84 in the big book within the text, it begins to talk about step 10. And there's there's just a few paragraphs dedicated to step 10. There's not a ton that it says about it. And as far as I can tell, there's only one paragraph with the real sort of meaty directions. And in fact, it's only like half of that one paragraph that really tells us what to do. But I'm just going to read it real quick, because I have had so many different ideas about what step 10 is and isn't, and what it looks like in practice. And I have practiced those ideas. And what I'm doing today feels currently the purest and I don't know, most streamlined, just clearly what the big book has to say, nothing less, nothing more. And I really, really love that about it. I think I'm becoming more and more of a purist, frankly. But on page 84, it says, this thought brings us to step 10, which suggests we continue to take personal inventory and continue to set right any new mistakes as we go along. We vigorously commence this way of living as we have cleaned up the past. We have entered the world of the spirit. Our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. This is not an overnight matter. It should continue for our lifetime. So back to, having these brand new experiences in my late 20s of recovery, not late 20s. So then here's where the directions start, as far as I can tell. I mean, here's the clear-cut directions. Continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. And a friend of mine kind of coined this, as far as I know. Those are the 4 watchwords. I'd never heard it put that way, like the watchwords, but it says, watch for these 4 things. And they sort of coined the watchwords. And I say that now. I say that all the time. So continue to watch for those 4 watchwords: selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. And one of the things that I notice about that is it doesn't say or fear. It doesn't say that I'm looking for one of those things. It says that I'm looking for all of those things. And I need to be looking at and facing all of those things within myself. And I really believe that there's such an integral relationship between the 4 that it's hard for me to imagine how you're ever going to find one without the others. It really is. And then it says, so we're watching for them. Then it says, when these crop up, the first thing we do, we ask God at once to remove them. So the moment I recognize, as far, the way I read this, not after I've inventoried and dug into it and figured out what's going on, but the moment I recognize that there's some kind of disturbance, some kind of something, even if I'm not even sure yet, is this resentment? Is this fear? What is this? It doesn't matter. I have something going on. I have some sort of inner disturbance. It says to ask God to remove it. Just ask God to remove it. And then it says, and that's another thing I just want to point out. I used to think that because it says and ask God to remove it, I ought to be able to just skip down the road doing nothing else, but it doesn't say that. There's more to it. Yes, we ask God to remove it, but then there's some things that we get to do. And it says we discuss them with someone immediately. Now, this is where you have to interpret a little bit. There's no way around it, and you can interpret it differently. And I can't possibly say, like, what's the right interpretation or not. What is the right interpretation? But my interpretation, as far as I can tell today, is that we discuss the inventory. That hopefully, because we have taken inventory in the 4th step, we have had some real experience with that we, what I do is I take those 4 watchwords, and I'm very lazy, and I don't like to write, and I don't like to take any more time than necessary, and I have a little trouble with my hands. So when I do it, I put RSDF for resentment, selfishness, dishonesty, and fear. And I just put RSDF, and then I just put little blurbs next to each thing. My 10 steps are almost always resentments. They just are. I don't love that that's the case, but it is. And so it's generally just this briefest as possible, as brief as possible, at whom, for what, because I would love to get into the story of it. I would love to build my case, and I would love to share it all with you and have you agree with me and all that kind of stuff that just gets me in so much trouble. So it's really good for me to challenge myself to be as brief as possible, just at whom, for what. That's not what's important. So once I jot down at whom, for what, as minimally as possible, then I dig into the selfishness, dishonesty, and fear, because that's the problem. Not what they're doing or not, or what I perceive they're doing or not doing, but what's going on inside of me that's causing this disturbance, because that's what's causing the disturbance, not what I perceive them as having said or done or not said or done. And so I jot that down. And then it says, we discuss them with someone immediately and make amends quickly if we have harmed anyone. So one of the things that I do when I do that quick little written inventory, for me, it's usually like something in my phone or on my laptop if I'm at home, which I often am, whatever's easiest for me. But when I reach out to another fellow or sponsor or whatever and share it, I just before I do that, just before I reach out and share it and discuss it with someone, is I ask myself, and I really feel like I'm asking God. I mean, it's sometimes I feel like I'm asking myself, but I've just prayed and I've just done this inventory, so it's all God. Sometimes I literally ask God, but I'm asking if there's any. It says, make amends quickly if we have harmed anyone. That's the exact language it uses. So I used to always ask myself if I owe an amends, because that's how I interpreted it. Do I owe an amends? And one of the things that has changed for me in a really big way that most people don't love on the surface, I didn't either, but has been a game changer for me, is to, instead of asking myself, do I owe an amends? Because I'm pretty good at finding a way that I don't. I'm really good at that. Like, I'm really good at that. I've honed that skill. So it's better for me to ask if there's any way I might be able to make amends. And if you ask me, that's a completely different question. And when I ask myself that, I almost always am able to answer yes. The other way, I'm almost always able to answer no, whether it's right or not. That's the truth of the matter. So that's been a big thing. So it says, it goes on to say, then we resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help. Love and tolerance of others is our code. So, I think there's a few different ways you can interpret that. Some people, I originally heard that as I needed to immediately be of service. And I still don't see any harm at all in that, for sure. But I've relatively recently, heard people in book studies point out that it says we resolutely turn our thoughts. It doesn't necessarily say anything about our actions. It doesn't necessarily say that we have to immediately go out and do something. It says that we need to turn our thoughts, because the funny thing about the 10 step, as far as I can tell, is to do it right. It requires a bit of introspection. It requires, looking at me. But man, I better then find a way out of that, or I'm just going to end up in more trouble than ever, because I can't sit thinking about me. That's why all those years and years and years of psychoanalysis didn't work very well for me, because I can't get enough of me and my thoughts and feelings. That's not great for me. So I do have to turn. I do have to get. My friend calls it others. What is the word he uses? But I have to turn my attention to others, rather than self. I wish I could think of the word. And I already didn't. I knew there was something I wanted to share at the very beginning, and I said I forgot. And it just this moment came back to me, and it's a weird, awkward transition, but I'm going to do it anyways. At least I did just finish the paragraph, and I'll go right back to it. I just want to share. I meant very much to do this at the very beginning, and I think it has a greater impact, and it probably would have helped me be a bit more, I don't know, clear and cohesive and such. But when I get a chance to share these days, I usually start by sharing a little reading that a new friend puts out every single morning that just blows me away. And some of them more than others. But they do this little writing that's in honor of a sponsor who's passed away, and they share it with a bunch of program friends. And I got to get on their hit list, and I get a text message every single day. And man, some of them have you can hear it in my voice already, I'm sure, just reduces me to tears. They're so wonderful. And I just wanted to share today's real quick before I shared, but I'll do it now before I finish sharing. So this is, and there was one that he shared somewhere a while back that reminded me so much of the 10 step. It's ridiculous. I mean, I was like, it didn't say anything about the 10 step, but my God, the whole thing was 10. And I tried so hard to find it last night, and I couldn't. So I'm just going to share today's. So today's says December 13th, 2024. Good morning. Our keynote is persistence. The thought for the day attributes the unique success of Alcoholics Anonymous to the fact that it is based on a sincere desire to help other people. In my experience, any spiritual fellowship or program based in doing for others is more likely to flourish than those otherwise focused. Other than the physical allergy to and mental obsession with alcohol, what we call alcoholism is, I believe, actually the universal malady of humankind. It is selfishness and self-centeredness. Therefore, it cannot be effectively treated by any form of self-obsession. We were just talking about that. Concentrating on my relationship with God is necessary, but to bring that relationship into full reality, I must turn my attention to helping God's other children. There is little magic to be found by locking myself in a closet with God. If I am to know the full measure of spiritual bounty, I must persistently seek to help God's kids do what they need to have done. Oh, sorry. Uncle Don, you've always told me the spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. Both you and the new man must walk day by day in the path of spiritual progress. If you persist, remarkable things will happen. When we look back, we realize that the things which came to us when we put ourselves in God's hands were better than anything we could have planned. Follow the dictates of a higher power, and you will presently live in a new and wonderful world, no matter what your present circumstances. You were right on the money. Thank you all for my life. I am so grateful. I hope my actions show that always. This is beautiful. I love you all. Can we start over now? this is that's how I wanted to start. And now all the things that I wish I'd said are right there. So funny. So I'm just gonna backtrack a little bit and share briefly that and this is very, very humbling. I started attending a meeting maybe 2 years ago. So I was, at least 29 years sober. It was a relatively young group. I mean, the meeting itself had only been around not long before I found it. The members of the group were relatively young in age, relatively young in recovery, which I suppose makes sense. I was like the old timer for sure. It was a very strong big book study group. And they just happened to be really strong on the 10th step in a way that in all my years in program, I'd never come across. I just remember being so taken aback by it and kind of impressed by it. Like, wow, that, not quite how it was laid out for me, for sure. It was not even, to be honest with you. And I can't say enough about the woman I think of as my first real sponsor. She took me through the book and the work with such integrity. I am, just eternally grateful for that. And the 10th step was a little bit light. It just kind of was. And I imagine that's because it was a little bit light the way it was given to her. And it was a little bit light in her, many years of practice. And so anyways, I get introduced to this young group of young people who are all on fire, like we sometimes are. And man, are they on fire for the 10th step. And they actually start this little chat group that's dedicated to 10 steps. So there's people all over the world, and you can reach out at any time of day or night in your particular part of the world. And there's usually someone somewhere who can, make themselves available to take your 10th. And so I began to have this experience around looking at 10 more and practicing it more and being exposed to different people from all over the world and all different spiritual practices and very different ideas about what the 10th step was, and how to practice it. And it was very, very interesting. And fortunately, rather than just having a bunch of, intellectual argument come up, I found it fascinating. I found it really rich and wonderful. And it just, I don't know, it just began to work on my consciousness a lot. And that young group taught me an awful lot about the 10th step and really got me back to that little paragraph. In fact, that half of little paragraph that really talks about, what we're to be doing. And I got involved in that 10 step group. I started, doing far more 10 steps. I started sharing them with, not just my sponsor, but, many, many other people, because I'd also been kind of taught to do it with your sponsor. And I see a lot of good reasons for doing that, especially in the beginning. And in some ways forever, because who knows you better than your sponsor. But there's also something really rich and wonderful about doing them with other people. And I also started taking them as just kind of a way to be of service. And man, is there something really wonderful about taking other people's 10 steps. And that had never really been part of my practice outside of, my own sponsees. It was very different. There was something very different about it and very enriching. And it began to fill my life in a really special way. It began to be like an integral part of my daily practice, my daily recovery, my daily spiritual life and spiritual walk. And it's been really, really, really wonderful. And I've had like friendly debates, like I know and love most of these people, so we're able to even disagree with love and respect. And in some cases, I may have changed their mind once or twice, and in other cases, they've changed my mind once or twice. And also we've just agreed to disagree, if you will, or not even that. That's the wrong. I don't even want to use that kind of language, but just understood that we had a different understanding at this stage, because who knows what might happen next week, for all I know. And so I've just had this really, really, really rich and wonderful experience around 10. And part of connecting with all those people over the world and seeing all the different ways of doing it, one of the things that kind of hit my radar, I'm not sure how to say this exactly because I don't want it to, I don't mean it as a judgment, and I fear that it could sound that way. Um, but one of the things that kind of like almost concerned me a little bit is how a lot of brand new people were being taught to do things that were, well, they were long and they were complicated, and they included all kinds of sections that, as far as I can tell, are not anywhere in the big book, at least under the 10th step. In some cases, they were being referred back to the 4th step. In some cases, they were being referred back to a piece where the big book talks about fear. And they were being referred to all these different places instead of just sticking to what the big book says about 10, where it talks about 10. And one of those friendly debates with someone that I, very much love and respect, they are, as far as I know, I haven't talked to them super recently, but as far as I know, they are thoroughly convinced that because it suggests we continue to take personal inventory, that clearly that implies that we go back to the 4th step and do that inventory. And that doesn't make sense to me, because I feel like if the 10th step was to repeat the 4th step, I don't know. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me in and of itself. And even if it was, it would say so in my head and heart. If the 10th step was designed to just now do the 4th step again, it would say so. It would say, use that process, do that. To me, this is a different inventory. It's a new introduction. Just like every step, they work together and they build upon one another. And there's all kinds of, beautiful connections, but they are different steps with some slightly different directions and sort of angles, if you will. And so to me, it just makes sense that this is going to be different, that this is going to be what 10 is. And what 10 is to, it's not the 4-step inventory. It's not the 11-step nightly review inventory. It's the 10-step inventory. That's another thing that didn't make sense to me, because if it was that, then what about the 11-step inventory? It makes sense to me that this is a daily thing that we're to do throughout the day, and that it's this smaller, there's a word I'd really like to use that I can't think of right now, but it's like streamlined. Like I said earlier, it's this smaller, shorter, short and sweet, very streamlined process to get to what's going on with me. And I think I only have a few more minutes, so I want to be sure. A couple of minutes. I want to be sure to say one thing before we switch over to. So let me just pull it up real quick. I should have already had it ready to go. I just want to look back at an inventory that I did once that felt really kind of spiritually inspired. And just to give you an idea of some of what has happened for me around the 10th step outside of what I've already said, because I feel like I talked around it a lot and not a whole lot about my actual process and what an inventory looks like. So again, RSDF, at whom for what's going on with me. The selfishness is, the the obsession with me, the focus on me. And that can look like, my thoughts, my feelings, my comfort, my security, my finances, the list is endless. And what it helps me see when I do, write several of them is it's just me again. That's what's going on. Also, my selfishness is always anchored in demands of others. Always. You're just not doing it right. The universe is often not treating me right. Like that's what's going on for me. And so I need to look at that. I need to see that again, I'm obsessed with me and I'm demanding that you do it my way so that I get to be, I think it's going to make me comfortable, which is not true, of course, but sorry, I just had it went away because I dropped my finger. So, and then, a lot of dishonesty is like, for me, a lot of times my dishonesty is anchored in, I'm taking it personally. I take everything personally. I'm so ridiculously sensitive. It's always about me because everything's about me. And I make up a lot of stories about things, and I don't mean to. It's not my intention, but I just do. I think I know. I think I'm smart. I think I'm very perceptive. I actually am very perceptive, but I'm not always right. And dishonesty is also always geared in or anchored in some version of forgetting about God. Playing God, thinking I'm God, making you my God, forgetting that I have a God who's so wonderful and takes such good care of me and has never, ever, left me alone before. And my fears are always so very self-centered and just full of old, ugly, false ideas that, even with all the spiritual work I've done and all the freedom, I was listening to this talk this morning. They talked about liberation of the soul. I have had such a liberation of the soul. And yet when just the right thing happens, when I'm not in the best possible spiritual condition, I'm all the way back to, I'm not good enough. Nobody loves me. It's just yuck. And so this is the last thing I'll say. Selfishness can be selfishness, self-centeredness, self-seeking, self-pity, anything with self. It's that me thing, self-obsession with and list them, selfish demands for list them, dishonesty, questioning, even bad mouthing God's handiwork or creation, especially when I'm picking on you. Like that's even when I'm picking on me, frankly, and this is one of the greatest lies I've ever told myself. And I've told myself it so many times, that I'm not okay right here, right now, exactly as I am. And that anything external can make me happy, that we are made happy by any, fill in the blank. That we're made happy, period. That happiness is a future deal or achievement deal rather than a state of being that comes from the soul and is available to me right now. And that growing up is an outside deal rather than an inside deal. And that any version of they or it will fix me. And any version of using that as an excuse not to show up and do the work that I need to do to position myself for whatever it is. And any version of God's love not being enough, and fear is so often what others think of me. So often what others think of me. If I feel as though I'm being disrespected or belittled or treated in a way, and then I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, I'm not worthy. And this is the very last thing. I've always asked myself that, amends, right actions, any sort of something. I'm kind of like a corrective measures type of thing from the nightly review. I wrote this when I had this sort of spiritual inspiration. Beg God to remove the obsession of self that blocks me from him and others. Thank God from the bottom of my heart for everything I can come up with and all that I may not be able to see yet. Ask him to take me in my life to use as he would. Again, third step, express love and gratitude directly for anyone and everyone I can. Give what I demand of others. That was one of my sponsors' mantra. mantras, and continue to show up strong in this new commitment to recovery, because it's always a new commitment, and work on my insides and leave the outside to God. And thank you so much for letting me share. I hope that wasn't too wildly all over the place.
Debbie, I appreciate it. And I've got a couple of comments about the magic that you were sharing here today. So really, and I agree, there's some magic in what has been brought through you in your share today. And before we get into the Q&A, there were a couple of things, a couple of requests. One of them was that if you are willing to share that message you received this morning from that group with me, I will get that. I'll post it on our WhatsApp group, and I'll make it available to anybody who wants to email me and have that sent to them. You can email me at rico12pod@gmail.com. I'll send that out to you. Are you okay with that? Awesome. Thanks, Debbie.
Yeah.
And then the second was a lot of people saying, man, I want in on that 10-step group. What are your thoughts on that, Debbie? Let me actually share my thoughts first. I'm a part of a couple of these 10-step WhatsApp groups or group texts or whatever it may look like. And I love them. They're amazing. And I think that when you get above a certain number of people in there, it might cause some chaos. So my thought is create the fellowship you crave, create something like that. What's your take on that, Debbie?
It's funny you should mention that, because I can't remember now if it's 200 or 300, but I think I might be getting the 300 from you I think it might be 200. I think we broke the 200 mark in the group. I've actually become a member of admin too. So but I got to tell you, there are people that are in the throes of relapse. There are people who are really, really, really sick. There are people who, there's oh God, what's the word? There's a requirement for joining the group, and that's that you have worked through at least steps 1 through 10 out of the big book with a sponsor. And we ask people that very directly, and only if we get a yes answer do we enter them into the group. And we just explain why and welcome to come back if that's not the case yet. But the thing is, people answer yes and they join, and they have no experience with a 10-step. So it is a little bit of a crapshoot when you ask for a 10-step. It's a little bit of a crapshoot when you accept a 10-step. You don't know if people sometimes think outreach is a 10-step. People sometimes think just talking about it and sharing about it. And, so it's, I'm not sure I'm answering your question or not, but as much as there's been some super, super positive stuff about it, there's also been some, sort of interesting stuff about it. And I have to keep in mind that I have a pretty sturdy foundation that, so I'm probably not in any danger. If you were real new and joined this group and went with whatever the first person told you, it might not be great. So yeah, I think hopefully you have a good, strong sponsor and solid relationship with that sponsor that you're working with, and can talk to them about it. I even tell people that join the 10-step group that I know intimately, pay attention and, maybe collect a group of people that you feel good about working with, and maybe reach out to them directly. Because if you just put in the group 10-step, you're asking 200 people. And what generally happens, what almost always happens, is the first person to offer, nobody else offers after that. And that's who you get. So, yeah.
No, that's great. And do you mind, Debbie, if I share a little bit about one of the 10-step groups that I'm in and how that looks? Is that okay with you if I take this? Yeah. So there's one that I'm in that it's like no storytelling. And they just say, okay, here's what we want in this. And that's the rule. And I actually, before this meeting, posted one because I spotted fear. I'm like, what if my speaker doesn't show up? What if nobody shows up? And that fear comes in there. And so I posted, I spotted fear. I'm asking God to remove it and turning my thoughts to people I can help. And that was the whole thing, And is that a full 10th step? I don't know, but sure helps me, right? And that's something that's been helpful to me. How about so one of the questions that we have here is, I'm going to get here. This is from Susan, and this talks about a little bit about this 10th step and what it might look like. Susan says, for me, an inventory can mean a list. And as the other type of inventory is covered in step 4, I interpret this as my list of what is currently going on that is disturbing my peace. I have interpreted it as having a deep dive into what is disturbing my peace. And then she says, do you think that works? Just wondering if my interpretation aligns with what you're talking about, this step 10.
I love the verbiage. I mean, to me, that matches up beautifully. I'm not sure. I'm a very literal person and a bit anal, so I'm not sure exactly what that looks like. I mean, I'd be curious to like see the list, but I mean, as long as the list covers my selfishness, my dishonesty, and my fear, because the book seems to think that, and resentment, frankly, because it might be a fear. And then I need to ask myself what sort of resentment is involved, even though it's not a resentment, because I didn't really talk about this, but because resentment doesn't have to be seething rage. It can be a, like a petty annoyance. It could be some lack of acceptance. I'm just it can be resistance. It can be resistance. So to me, it's not so much about the format or being a stickler for the format as it is being a stickler for the 4 watchwords. I think it's really important that I cover the 4 watchwords, because I've noticed that every time I've not gotten completely free.
Yeah, and you mentioned, this isn't necessarily for those. It doesn't have to be a big resentment where you're ready to go out and murder somebody. In fact, if in what I'm gathering from what you say, if I'm continuing to watch for these things, I'm going to catch them as they're just sprouting, as they're just cropping up, and so they're baby resentments. So next question is regarding the statement that you mentioned earlier. Is there any way I might be able to make amends? I love this. And can you give us some examples of what that has looked like, especially with baby resentments, like something that somebody is not even aware of? What does that question look like when you say, hey, is there any way I can make amends here?
Yeah, like one example is I probably have a million in my head just from the last couple of days if I think of my own and sponsees, but for some reason I'm not getting able to draw on it right now. But one example might be that let's say I had, I kind of am drawing on a sponsee actually. Let's say I had a conversation with someone and I wasn't honest with them. And let's say that, you know, that there's not necessarily any reason for me to think, I can't know, of course, but there's not necessarily any reason for me to think that I harm them. But, like the way that the thing that I was dishonest about, or the way, there's no reason to think that I actually harm them. But for me, amends has become less and less about making amends to you and making things making things right with you, and more about amending and making things right with my soul. So if I've been dishonest with you, it's going to be really good for my soul to go back to you and say, you know what, I have something I need to clean up with you. I wasn't honest. That's amends. And that is powerful and humbling and soul changing. That's what I'm discovering more and more. I mean, that's just one little example, but and also I literally write amends / right action ? For some reason, that's what I write every time after my inventory lately. It's been a lot of different things, but that's lately what I always write is amends / right actions. And sometimes it's just a simple, like, sometimes I do an inventory about something that I'm a little bit upset about. And I, by the end of it, I realized that, oh gosh, why didn't I just do this? Or why didn't I just do that? Or I could just, whatever. And so the right action is to just do that, for God's sake, just do it. And then it's gone and over. And I'll just hold on to things into my, I'll bury myself with the stupidest thing. And I love what you said about it just being like a baby start of, just the hint of, because the way I was kind of taught and trained originally is you really only did tense when they were big enough. And or even if they were, silly, stupid, trivial, whatever, if you just could not get rid of them, like if it was just, my grandson used to call it eating your lunch, if it was just eating your lunch and you just could not seem to, get rid of it. And that is not what the big book says at all. That is not what I do today. And I'm really, really grateful for that shift.
Yeah. Thank you, Debi. I'm getting some requests to get in contact with you, Debi. Would you be open to me, if they reach out to me, sharing your contact information with them, that they can reach out to you?
Absolutely. And I have my
Perfect.
full name and telephone number on the screen in my box. And I am on WhatsApp just in case you're not in the States. And yeah, I'm pretty easily reachable anytime and really happy to get calls.
Perfect. And for those listening to this afterwards and recorded, send me an email at rico12pod@gmail.com and I will get you in contact with Debi. All right. Next question I have, or next observation I have from your share early on in your share, Debi, was this. You said, after nearly 30 years in the room, more is being disclosed. I'm waking up to this step 10 process almost 30 years in, or more than 30 years in. And then you said something to the effect of, you know what, if I say something different in 6 months, that's a good thing. Talk to me about how change and evolution is a good thing in recovery.
Yeah, another thing that, like I used to um do or think or believe. Um God, I'm trying to think how to say it exactly, but it used to feel I don't know, it used to feel like a bad thing when I would, have like a shift in consciousness and realize, oh, and I would just feel like, oh God, I got that all wrong, I got that all wrong, and now I laugh and say things like, thank God I got to be wrong again, I don't know what that is, but somehow God has got through to me. Like maybe there's just a little more of the shedding of the ego or something. And he's just gotten through to me that it's not because I'm always about my ego and justifying and, you know, um, guarding and holding it, and I don't want to be wrong. I want to be right, and I want to continue to be right. And it is such I don't even know if I'm answering your question, but it is such a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful thing to be perfectly okay with being wrong. Like it's just really beautiful. And it's clearly part of the process. I mean, the big book, I wish I could think I'm a horrible, horrible, horrible big book quoter, but I know there's things throughout our text that communicate that and, subtly and not so subtly that this is a lifetime process that I must what's the word about my spiritual life? I must what my
Maintain my
no, not
spiritual
maintain.
condition. No, not that one. Okay.
Not maintain, the opposite of maintain.
Grow,
Enlarge. I must
enlarge. Yep.
enlarge, right? That's I must I mean, we do talk about, but yeah. I must enlarge my spiritual life, not just have one, not just get one and not just maintain it, but I must enlarge it. And I'm pretty sure that doesn't mean, in the first days, weeks, months, or even early years. I'm pretty sure that means always, always. And I'm really, really grateful for that. Like I'm never, ever, ever going to float on water or become a nun or, that's not going to happen. But man, am I continuing to be changed. I really am. Like I am continuing to be changed. And when that guy this morning, someone had posted a little, I think it was like this, like kind of a little podcast recording. And I just pushed play because I was kind of not wanting to get up yet and lazy in bed, and I was listening to it, and this guy said something about the liberation of the soul. And I don't know, I just felt it like um I'm certainly not, I sort of envision completely liberated as, but I am experiencing that. I am having that experience here, why I'm still just a fellow traveler walking on earth. And yeah, it's I have a bad habit of saying the longer I'm here, and that makes it sound like it's time. And I don't know that it has nearly as, it does have to do with time, but I don't know that it has nearly as much to do with time as the experience. But but I just am having this deepening experience around, well, you know how people used to talk about being okay in my own skin. It's that at a level that I could not have even imagined. Like there's this authenticity that I've never had before that I have today. And there's integrity that I've never had that I have today. And it's very think of, but it's very solid. It's very strong. It's something that can be relied on, and I can be relied on. Like that's what, I'm one of the things that means a lot to me today is that I'm a safe person. I'm a safe person. I have not always been a safe person, and I'm a safe person in and out of the rooms. And I'm really, really grateful for that. And that's happened to me and for me.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And that liberation of the spirit, liberation of the soul. I can't remember if you said soul or spirit, but either way, that liberation that's happened. And I see, and you kind of choked up as you shared about that. How does that manifest itself in a day where maybe things are going wrong all over the place in your life, where in the past you may have just exploded in resentment, fear, dishonesty, and selfishness, but now you're able, hopefully, a little bit to keep that tamed by giving it up? What does that look like?
I've had a couple of those in the, like this year. I've had a couple of those this year. And I have responded inwardly, not so well. I've responded inwardly, not so well. I have once or twice seemingly had to, or maybe had to is not the way to put it, but I have nevertheless, I usually don't cuss, but sort of bitched and moaned and complained and whined and stomped my feet a few times like a child might, for just a moment, for just the briefest moment. But I have done that for just a moment and had this wonderful experience of seeing the ridiculousness of it, of seeing and then either gone straight to the 10 step, which has just become, such a lifesaver and deal changer. I can't say it enough. And or, well, it's part of the 10th step. So really what I've done is turn to God, just turn to God. And a lot of times the way I turn to God is through the 10th step, because I pray first and then I do a little, I pray first, I sit quietly, I pause, I sit quietly, I let him and it sort of wash over me. And then I generally jot down my little inventory real quick. I generally, get in touch with someone I can share that with real quick and have a conversation. I see if there's something in the way of amends or right actions that I can do. And there always is when it's something big like that. There always is. There's always something that needs to be done, or at least that can be done and will heal me like nothing else, will. And I do those things. I'm willing to do those things because I think part of it is the longer I'm here and the deeper I get into this, the less. I always feel like I'm being a little bit silly when I say this, but I really, really, really mean it. It's like the less tolerance I have for any kind of discomfort. It's kind of funny. Like I like happy, joyous, and free. I really like happy, joyous, and free. I do not want to be miserable. I do not want to be imprisoned. I do not want to be in prison. I don't want to be in prison by alcohol or drugs or food or cigarettes or, any of those things. And I don't want to be imprisoned by my own thoughts. So I'm really willing to give it up, I guess is what it is, because there's been a couple of times that stuff really hit me hard, and I just kind of had a good cry with God and then did the work. And then I was just fine. But you know what? I also got right into service. And I'm always sponsoring, I'm always taking 10 steps, I'm always um trying to find a way to help others. I'm always trying to find a way to serve. And that, that saves me for sure. That keeps me every now and then when I've been in the throes of something, like a new sponsee will reach out, really having a problem. And I'll, deal with them. And hours later, I'll realize, oh, I forgot all about that. Forgot all about the thing, didn't even do the 10th, because the service just fixed me.
Yeah,
And if I do remember it,
I
I still go back and do it.
Yeah. And that turning thoughts to being of service to somebody else really works magic. And when you're able to physically turn to be of service to someone else, it's amazing. So thank you for sharing that. Debi, are there any final words of wisdom you have for us before we wrap up?
I know you do that, and I should have thought of it, but I didn't. And I don't know, the only thing that I might say, especially because I didn't do any sort of, brief history introduction, is, sometimes the 10 step or any step for that matter, when someone shares about a particular step, it can seem very like, oh, maybe this is my answer. At least I'm like that, especially when someone gives kind of a good talk about something, you're like, oh, that's it. And I just would say for anyone who's new or returning, or maybe just still, struggling and suffering some, hasn't really had that vital spiritual experience that the book talks about, that just please, 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 please keep in mind that there is no 10th step without 1 through 9. And these steps they're in an order for a reason. They work together in ways that we can't possibly understand. But they do, they build upon one another and work together. And they're intertwined in ways that I wouldn't even try to explain to myself, let alone you. Just if like I said, if you're any of those things, just give yourself a real chance, hook up with someone who's recovered and let them take you through all the steps, 1 through 12 in order. This is what my sponsor said to me when I was 3.5 years for the second time, having done the steps pretty much every way you can think of, except the very intimate, humbling experience of one-on-one sponsorship. And she said to me, let them take you through all steps 1 through 12 in order as laid out by them, based, of course, hopefully right out of the big book, but as laid out by them based on what their experience has been, what worked for them, with what did she say? Regardless of what you've already done and think you already know. Like the set aside prayer. Really, it was like the ultimate set aside prayer. She said, she said, you don't have to believe in it. You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to understand it. You don't have to, have any faith that's going to work. You just have to do it. Like, you can be just as pissy and combative and, as long as you do it. Sometimes people are really agreeable, but they don't do it. They die. People like me live, so it's okay you don't have to be gracious. You just have to do it. And if there's anything at all I can do to help anyone, please reach out.
Yeah, thank you so much, Debi, for a fantastic RICO 12 weekly speaker meeting. If there are other questions that anybody out there may have, consider joining our WhatsApp community. I put the link in the chat here. You can join us by emailing me at rico12pod@gmail.com. join in that conversation. If you haven't done so already, please consider rating and reviewing the podcast on Apple Podcasts. It really helps us in the Step 12 work, getting that out there to more people in more places. Next Friday, we'll hear from Monty M. He spoke with us previously, and next week his topic is going to be anonymity doesn't mean secrecy. And stay tuned in the email list and the WhatsApp community for more information on that. And let's launch off into the rest of our day with the Lord's Prayer that Debbie will say for us.
So, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen. I pulled up a slightly different version, but I guess it.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Debbie. Remember, everybody, there's one who has all power. That one is God. May you find God now. Come all the way in, sit all the way down. Let's trudge this road of happy destiny together. Work it. You are worth it.